Okay, in 2017, we have an abundance of good horror movies. We had Get Out. We had, well, I can put Happy Death Day on there.
Yeah.
It and Annabelle Creation, one of my favorites. Endless. I liked Endless too. And of course, you have this one, an independent film. It's kind of bunched in. I still labeled this one when it came out in 2015 the top 5 of my favorite horror movies. I'll going to see after I talk about it if it maintains that. So we're going to talk about one that was packed in all those great horror movies and probably did get a little notoriety at the time.
Yeah, so I'm going to go grab my anxiety pills and we'll get started, okay?
Yes,
Super
that's
dark
a lot,
time.
a lot of anxiety. This.
Welcome back to the show. I'm one of your hosts, Kyle Goethe from GoatFilmReviews.com.
Hi, everybody. I'm Nick from the St. Paul Filmcast. Thanks for finding us. Thanks for watching. And for our loyal fans, thank you for continuing to support the show. You can follow the show on Twitter and on Instagram. We do have a Patreon. Check that out for some great deals. And today we're going to talk about, got nominated, a couple nominations for independent film. It's Super Dark Times.
Yeah, so Zach and Josh have been best friends as long as either of them can remember.
Yes.
But when a horrible accident occurs, Zach helps his buddy cover his tracks to protect him. This leads both young men down a disturbing path full of escalating fear and paranoia.
Okay, there's multiple reasons why I want to talk about this. Number one, it's written by the same people who did the recent movie Hellraiser.
Yeah.
Also, Eli Bourne is a cinematographer for this one, and he also was a cinematographer for Hellraiser, if I remember right. He also was a cinematography for Wild Indian. If you haven't seen that movie yet, it's also free on Amazon Prime. It's another interesting movie I think we should discuss as well.
This film's editor also did Young Indian.
Wild Indian.
Or Wild Indian.
Wild Indian. Yeah, so there's a lot of things that kind of meshed in. And since it's the same screenwriters, since it's their first movie, I think it's a good time to talk about it. Not to mention, it's not an October horror film, but it's definitely a November horror film.
Yeah, I always kind of connect October horror with, like, just above all, the feeling I get from October horror is usually I want to have some fun. Yeah. I can't say this is a fun horror movie.
It's not a fun horror movie. So, it's directed by Kevin Phillips. He got nominated for Best Director for Independent Spirit Award. He also got nominated for Best Independent Film for the Saturn Awards. So did get a lot of accolades. He was also on a director to look out for IFC Films. Other nominations for that. But yeah, it had great reviews. It kind of went under the radar. I think I heard more about this from podcasts than from regular film critics when it came out.
I think more than anything, it has a really engaging title. Because I had heard the title 5 years ago, didn't get around to watching it, but it kind of like sticks in your ear, like that little creature from Wrath of Khan. You know, it's just in there.
I would say it's a good title. Right?
Yeah.
It's an interesting component to this. There are no really monsters. There's no mysticism involved. It's really a circling events. It's more of an aesthetic. I'll get to my review talking about it more. But I just want to, if you haven't seen it yet, there's really no monsters or anything gorific that I think horror fans really want to attach.
And part of that comes with just the low budget too. Like the film skirts a lot of its violence in the you see just enough to get the implication.
Yeah.
And in that way, you know, it works as a Jaws-esque version of things. You know, you see just enough to understand what's happening, to fear what's happening, but also we can't afford to do much more, especially with the specific kind of weapons used.
At the time, a lot of the stars were kind of unknown, but they kind of went on to do other things that you probably recognize, like Elizabeth Cappuccino. She's the younger Jessica Jones in the TV show.
Oh, okay.
She plays this Allison, who the two boys kind of have a mutual affection for. You see Charlie Tehan. He's been in Ozarks, as well as some other feature events, and then Owen Campbell. The two, Josh, and then the other boy I'm thinking of. Zach and Josh, and then Allison. This is kind of, and I say it's effective work. Love triangles do work very effectively in film. So this is not really so much blatantly a love triangle. It is still there.
Yeah, again, it has every element of the film is infused with anxiety. And so that includes the love triangle. And it's because I think we're meant to get angry with a lot of Zach's choices. Not so much his choices in plot A, but his choices throughout, you know, his schooling time, throughout his relationships with other people. And it's just like you just want to grab him through the screen and just tug at him because you wanted to make the right calls for himself.
The story is supposed to take place in the mid-90s. Now, they're not going to blatantly over-the-top tell you that through... It's not a nostalgia piece. Mm-hmm. It's not really important to know that, other than there's a lot of talking on the phone and phone tagging that you did in the 90s.
Yeah.
But it's supposed to take place there. I don't understand the reason for it. I think if you watch the film and somebody's like, oh, that's supposed to be like 1993, you're like, oh, I didn't really recognize that very much, other than there's nobody's on their cell phones. So there's not really... It's not the 90s for nostalgia, but there's something prevalent I think the writers are trying to talk about from their previous history, because I think they're the same age I am.
I'm sure there's a bit of, you write what you know, and I grew up in the 90s and the early aughts, and I would probably use a lot of those elements were I writing a film like this, especially because it is about that youth. It is about that time period when you are lost in the world, looking for that purpose. And I mean, again, I would always go back to that. It's funny. I actually went through and I did like some research. I looked up some stuff online. I found like True Lies release date on home video, because they talk about renting the video cassette. And I looked up the music that was playing on the radio, and I found a couple of links here and there. I believe the film is set in 1996. That is my theory.
Yeah, it's very subtly like the math game that he plays on the computer.
Yep.
And then you can look at the stack of movies they have on his video.
I did some freeze frames. I was very curious about that. It was probably too much time spent on it.
And a little bit like fashion, not really very 1996, but it's very obvious that it's a little bit like the 1990s.
See, it feels like small town 96, because I grew up in a small town, and it felt like 96 to like 2006 in that time period of like, I don't want to say grunginess, but like just kind of like played down. When you're in a small town, it's kind of like that fall time period. It doesn't really feel like flashy, and that's kind of how my small town kind of felt.
So I always call, before this movie is made, I always called this time between November 1st and December 22nd, when we get to the winter solstice, super dark times. Because this is when we start losing daylight, and you do the whole change the hours and everything.
Yeah.
And usually around here in Minnesota, it gets dark at like 4:30.
Oh, yeah.
So I usually go, now we're in the super dark times. And this movie came out, I was like, wait, they stole my time. I always say this. Of course, us 90s, when we were teenagers in the 90s, everything was awesome or super or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I don't think kids use that phrase anymore, which kind of the title probably relays why we go back to the 90s for this.
Yeah, I don't know what kids would have called it now. If the film was made now, if you're younger than we are, why don't you tell us what you'd call the film in the comments?
Not vibing? I don't know. We don't vibe? I don't know. Right, yeah.
Sketch times or something. I don't know.
Super dark times and sketchy dark times.
There
right?
You go.
Yes. So I looked up Kevin Phillips. I don't know if he's done anything after this, after all the accolades for this direction.
So 2 short films.
Okay.
One that technically qualifies as a feature, but it's 45 minutes, and another short film that was like 10, 15 minutes. But I haven't seen a feature on his work since this, which is a little odd.
So it's interesting because the screenwriters Ben Collins and Luke Petrowski, as well as cinematographer Eli Bourne and the editor, have all go on to do other movies with David Bruckner.
Yep.
And with Hellraiser. They kind of coalesce.
And The Night House, Bruckner's previous film before that. So it's kind of like they jumped ship. I'm sure not on purpose, but I'm sure that like they kind of reached out. And it's odd to me that a film that did kind of like skirt some festivals, got some nominations, and its director is essentially just not moved forward.
As other parts of the crew has come to formulate and kind of work together as well. Yeah. Aesthetically, it's like I said, I think it fits for November. It's out in the woods. It's in Connecticut. Those things are not as important, but it's nice to know about because it's kind of, I don't know if this is like East Coast, uptown, out in the woods, but you can attach yourself. If you lived up in northern Minnesota, it kind of can relate to it. So I say location's not as important, but aesthetically it's for the importance.
Yeah, like from the very beginning, I knew all 4 of these kids. Like, I won't tell you which one I was, but I knew all 4 of these kids from my youth. Hucking rocks off a bridge, or like just kind of wandering around with your bikes, going from woods to playground, and we drive to Walmart when we had nothing to do because you could just hang out inside for a little bit and it wouldn't be so cold. So I understood that kind of a realm.
Before we get to review, if you haven't seen the movie, please do. Because we have to get into spoiler events and stuff, and so this is a good time to go stop and watch it. But there's an important catalyst to starts everything in action for this movie, and it's fairly interesting because it doesn't happen a lot in horror movies. Horror movies almost intentionally, but it's almost organically. This is accidental, then it comes organically become the bad guy.
Yeah,
and I think that's the unique thing about this movie. It's independent, but the monster, it's not like even Stephen King. It's slowly building, and you get the anxiety that, am I right about this interpretation to this until the end?
Well, yeah. And again, not spoiling anything before we get to our review, but it almost feels like there's multiple checkoff items, at play during that inciting incident, which is very much again, anxiety fueled from about 10 minutes into the film, and you're just you know where you're headed. It's one of those films where some films the twists and the turns, or you don't know the twists and the turns, and that's what makes them exciting. Some films it's like a slow car crash, and you know exactly where everything's going to play out, and that makes you almost more nervous.
I'll take that one, for this one. Mm-hmm. Okay, up next is our review. This is a first-time watch for Kyle, Super Dark Times. Okay, I hand the keys off to Kyle. This is his first time. I wanted to get his reaction to this movie. What do you think of Super Dark Times?
So, this is a movie where the body of the film is amazing. The body of the film is wonderful. I get frustrated by some of the elements at the first 10 minutes of the movie, and I get frustrated by some of the elements in the last 10 minutes of the movie. But everything between that worked really well for an intensely anxiety-induced coming-of-age story from that moment on. And let me just start by saying, I'll give you the things that would frustrate me. I felt like that first 10 minutes really made me uninterested and disliking the four characters. So it was until we get to the inciting incident where the story starts picking up. There's a lot of them kind of hanging out, kind of talking crap to each other, and kind of just
they're teenagers.
They're teenagers, but I was a teenager too, and there's some of the things that they just did and were frustrated. It kind of felt like forced dialogue, and then I felt that the film doesn't really earn its payoff in the last 10 minutes. Not enough to discuss the film at all, but those kinds of things were frustrating end pieces to the film. But from the inciting incident, which we'll talk about here, through, I would say, most of the finale of the film, everything here is working really well. And again, it's that slow car crash where you know it's headed, and it just, oh man, I was biting my blanket. Just
So the first time I'm watching, you didn't understand the prevalence, because the beginning of the movie is the deer goes through the window into the school, almost self-destruction. Suicide. It's commit suicide. And it's played very foreboding. There is no shock. It's almost like this is all right. We have to deal with it. Yeah. And I never understood the importance of that until I watched it the second time. How this is a metaphor that everybody in this is going to going on a path of self-destruction. Because you spend a lot of time with this. Yeah. You don't even see the carcass. Is it a moose or a deer? Because I said one review said it's a moose, another said it's a deer. That shows you that they don't really care, other than it's an animal. Yeah. Four legs. Four legs. Not to mention, it's a lot of mood aesthetics, right? I think they get dialogue wonderfully how teenagers interact with themselves. Very subtly, even a glimpse, oh, you're pissed at me now? It could be something like that, or
so much of the stuff in the school scenes when the teacher's talking and they're not communicating but communicating. Where those subtle.
I think you forget as a teenager, all of a sudden your best friend's in the hallway and he ignores you, and then they're like, "What did I do? What are you pissed at me?" And you're like, "I didn't see you." Yeah, bullshit. It's that kind of stuff that we always know about teenagers. Not to mention that here there's nothing available. So you have a great explanation how they get into danger, because teenagers find something to do.
Oh, yeah, and they usually find something incredibly dangerous to do.
Incredibly dangerous to do.
Something I've done.
And they get the sword out here, and it's all about the playing sword, but it's also that they're not the best of friends. They're just kind of know each other. Yeah. And it's a dynamic that I kind of like, that it's not, they just happen to hang out to each other. All of a sudden...
Well, it's that thing you constantly get told about people, is that as you're growing up, that you're friends almost by proxy. You're by distance, he's the guy who lives down the block from me, so I can get there on my bike. He had a pool table in his basement, so I really liked him.
You got the pool table, so now you're my friend, right? Yeah.
And I think that's probably part of it, and that's something that's been covered too in a lot of coming of age films. Even comedies like Superbad cover the whole the way that you grow apart as you get older. Is an important
Brick started with a separation, right?
That's true too, yeah.
And I saw a lot of things, not necessarily aesthetically about Brick, but I understand that how characters interact with them. They did a lot of research how teenagers behave. I think that's where it sells. But also I think technically cinematography and editing is wonderfully in this movie. It's something to the point why did you shoot that so well? That is pretty good. It's just a classroom. Yeah. But the lighting and the aesthetics is played out very much that the kids, it's backlighting. So even the kids are in dark.
Yeah. I mean, as far as first-time feature films, the film looks gorgeous.
Yeah.
It looks like a studio
I
picture.
celebrate. Eli Bourne is one of those that anything he does, I'm gonna have to go see again. I want to rewatch Wild Indian just because of him. Done it. Yeah.
Yeah, the film it has that aesthetic of what is it? Patience. Not slow burn,
but dark
patience. Yeah,
art
like because there's a lot of elements where the camera is able to just capture a mood based on a shot outside, which could be incredibly cheesy or incredibly goofy in any other film, but like it lingers just long enough that you kind of get that mood. You get the music from Ben Frost, who's become quite a big name doing music for a lot of moody pieces. He just did the television series for Netflix 1899. He did all 8 episodes of that show. And yeah, his ability to create mood with score is really nice. And I don't usually care much for mood and score if it doesn't really blow me away, and this one does.
Yeah, because there's a major plot hole to it, and I'm not going to talk about the major plot hole, but aesthetically, look of it, everything, masterfully done. But I think they want a bookend that everybody's written-wise, they got dialogue great for me, but I think they didn't understand the clarity that the beginning of the movie is supposed to be everybody's on a path of self-destruction, using that as a metaphor, and at the end, we're all going to have scars, visually scarred by it, because that's why she has it in the back. Show that we're going to retain this, even though it seems almost uneventful at the time.
Yeah, I think you got a good point there with the everyone's on self-destruction, and almost so much that the path we're headed on, we don't know we're self-destructing, because that's where that deer moose, whatever it is, that's where that thing, like, it jumps through the window. It's assuming that it's jumping to safety, that it's moving somewhere, like it is headed to a place of safety in its mind, but ultimately it will not turn out well for him. And a lot of the settings where the darkness stuff happens here in the film are places that we would assume to be safe.
Right, the bridge, but then it's closed. It's almost like they're trapped there.
Yeah.
And everybody's really understand that there's no escape to here. Even talk about his brother goes to the Marines, but you never see him. Like, he doesn't want to be able to come back.
Well, just walking to the one character's house, too, and then being, like, accosted by these druggies outside. Like, your home is supposed to be a safe haven, and you've got people outside that will cause you harm, Yeah. And even, Zach, Owen Campbell's character, perceives the drug use as being something that's not safe, but he's always in places of safety when it's happening. So it's kind of like, the perception of safety versus danger in a comfortable setting.
And he's a typical teenage boy. The girl pretty much says, "I like you," and he still does. What? Yeah.
Can I tell you, that was the most frustrating anxiety of the whole thing. Is now I was a teen.
The girl blatantly says, "I like you. I like you more a lot now."
Yeah.
And he's like, what?
When a girl is literally leaping at you, you take it. Because he does like her. It's not a thing where he's like trying to avoid her, or she's like hunting him down. Yeah. But like, if you like a girl and she's throwing herself at you, what is wrong with you?
Right.
There's a reason he became a cinematographer in X, because he couldn't handle being in front of the camera. Anyway,
right, the character Owen Campbell, we talked about it another. He's in X. I forgot about that. He's the boom guy, and he didn't get it that his girlfriend.
Yeah,
he missed his radar.
See, he missed his chance every single time. Can I just say though, as far as chemistry goes, Campbell and Elizabeth Cappuccino have such amazing chemistry.
Oh yeah. If Zach and Allison,
Zach and Allison. If you remove the Chekhov's katana from the film, I'm interested in their romance.
That's clever.
I'm all for it. I'm like, I want to just watch them in a
but it
teen
played
romance.
out. And I'm going to give credit for the writing. It played out wonderfully for them because it's super teenager, right? Do you like me? Yeah. Okay. And then he calls her up to get somebody else's number.
Oh yeah.
And he called up,
bruh, come on. I did that once too, I think.
Right. But I was never convinced of his belief of what he thought Josh was doing until we saw the beach towel. Then I bought, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I know exactly what you mean. I kept thinking it was going to be the other friend. Charlie, is it? I believe it's Charlie. I kept thinking it was going to be him. Because, he calls him up, he's like, well, I know it wouldn't be you. And I'm like, why would you assume that of him but not your best friend? You know, but there is a shot at the beginning when they're on the bridge and he looks back at Josh and he sees him and he's concerned about him. He's standing up on top of that piece and looking like he might jump. And he's playful and everything like that. The guys are goofing on, but he sees him. And again, going back to the camera lingering, the camera lingers just long enough for us to be like, something's not right here. So we get that before any inciting incident, before anything happens right there. And when those elements start coming back, I kept thinking about that scene on the bridge that is ultimately not story.
Yeah. So overall, I still think I don't. Would you put it as one of the top 5 best? I mean, that's a crowded for 2017. It's one of those because you have Get Out, you have Happy Death Day, you have It, you have Annabelle Creation, where I really liked, Endless. You have some other ones too.
The problem is like
Alien Covenant came out.
So many of those films are like I think are like 4-star above films. I love a lot of the horror that came out that year. My only thing about it is, for me, I always think rewatchability, and this is a movie that I feel like I need time away from. Whereas, like, Get Out, I went through a period where I watched Get Out like 4 times in a week because it was just it's an entertaining movie and a thought-provoking
But this
one.
movie is so bleak, and like I said, there's no monsters. There's really no rah-rah cheering that you get in a lot of horror movies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, movies, I always tend to linger on fun horror because, like, I'm having fun watching. I'm excited about it. This movie is a fantastically made. But oh my God, I had to, like, there was a couple times I had to pause and just leave the room, make some popcorn, because I needed a break. Because it's just a lot to handle, and especially when you're dealing with kids doing dangerous things. And again, Chekhov's katana, Chekhov's weed bag. Like, all these things that are about to go off the whole movie.
Yeah,
maybe Chekhov's Allison.
And then, of course, perfect label, because that is the catalyst that gets them to the girls' room.
Yeah, every element. And I hate the fact that he doesn't get into Allison's bedroom until he has to protect her. And it's just like, oh man, it made me so mad watching this movie. And that's kind of how I felt watching The Night House. There was anxiety in The Night House as well. I didn't feel the anxiety level in Hellraiser, but I definitely felt they have an ability as screenwriters to really write depression, really write anxiety, really write frustration, and use it well, which is something that has a place.
That's my criticism for Hellraiser. They're good on this, that, but they need it. I think they're not really good for a Hellraiser. You need something else for Hellraiser.
Yeah.
And setting just aesthetically for mood, which you're really good for this. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough to place. And I mean, we haven't even talked about Amy Hargraves, who plays the mother, Karen.
Oh, right. Yes.
I could swear that I'd seen her in a bunch of stuff, and she's in a couple other things I've seen, like Michael Clayton, the film Offspring. She's in a couple of these elements, but I clung to her in this movie because she has a very strong, parental role in that she trusts her kid, but she doesn't really trust her kid. She cares about her
the
child.
right mom for a teenager.
Yeah,
right. Yeah.
But she knows that something's wrong, and it's kind of like we don't spend a lot of time with her character, but you can tell every interaction she has with Zach is one of detective work. It's one of just trying to figure out, are you okay? How can I take care of you? What's wrong? And I think that goes back to when we have things wrong in our lives as children, we don't tell the parents. We don't tell the friends. We don't tell our loved ones because we assume that there will be something bad that will come of it. We assume it will somehow get circled back on us. And that's kind of Zach's whole journey here is like one of how long can I continue this lie?
This movie validates my proverb, if you want to know. It's hire a teenager to do work for you. You get half the work done. Hire 2 teenagers. You will get no work done. And if you hire 3 teenagers, they will owe you money.
There you go.
So that's a reverse with Super Dark Times.
Yeah. Let us know your thoughts on the film down below. I would tell us what other Kevin films watch. We doesn't have any other ones. So
no, we'll go with this Eli Bourne. I really like his cinematography. I really do.
Fair enough. Yeah. Let us know. What other super dark films we should be covering on the show. We love breaking
November?
out these weird ones. Yeah, we got some super darkness in November here in Minnesota. So please join us for continued episodes of Scary Movie Saturdays.
This is a good sound movie.
Oh yeah. And then please make sure you like and subscribe. They're 2 free things that you can do. They help to support the channel, and you never miss new episodes of the show as they drop because we got 3 episodes a week. 3. Yeah. But if you want more than 3, check out the Patreon link, like Nick said.
Yeah, we can load up more. We're just waiting for somebody to tell us which ones.
Yeah, exactly. So thank you guys for joining us. You can find all my film reviews over at goatfilmreviews.com.
And you can find my show, the St. Paul Filmcast, anywhere you find podcasts. And I don't have a sword.
I do. It's plastic.